I informed my son that his father had died. He stated it was Megan's birthday. Can we speak tomorrow? That was the moment I knew I had lost more than simply my spouse. I had also lost a kid. He never showed up for the funeral, but 3 weeks later, he received a letter from my attorney. He opened it and froze. I did something he'll never forget, and I didn't say anything. Before we begin, please like and subscribe, and tell me and others what one life lesson everyone should learn before it is too late. Please share it in the comments below. Gerald died right there at the kitchen table in the middle of a joke about how I had purchased the incorrect sort of cream again. If I die from this powdered crap, he said, tapping his spoon on the edge of his cup, you'll finally understand true remorse. Then his hand twitched. The spoon slid. His eyes widened as if he forgot how to breathe. I dropped the butter knife I was holding and dashed towards him, yelling his name, but he was already gone. His body became limp before I could call 911. Before my knees struck the tile. Before I could inquire whether it was another of his blasted pranks. It was not. The operator's voice in my ear was calm, but my world had ripped open. I continued whispering his name as they directed me through chest compressions, but I was already aware. I knew by the way his head dropped against his shoulder and how cold his fingers were when I tried to grip them. When the paramedics arrived, I stepped back, stunned, hearing terms like huge, unrecoverable, and DNR, and simply nodded. Suddenly, the home felt both too loud and too quiet. I sat on the side of the couch, gazing at the floor, and after they'd covered him and informed me there wasn't anything else they could do, I grabbed my phone. I called my only son, Nathan. It rang 5 times. When he finally responded, I was shivering but managed to reply, "Nathan, it's Dad. He just collapsed. He's died." There was a pause, and then his flat, preoccupied voice remarked, "Oh, Mom, today is Megan's birthday. May I call you later?" I couldn't comprehend the words at first. I believed I was hallucinating them, but then he said, "She's got this whole brunch planned, and we're having people over." I didn't say anything. No scream, no sob. Just quiet. My hand lowered the phone instinctively. I hung up on my own son before he could say anything else. That would break me even more. The environment around me began to hum like if my ears were under strain. I looked over to Gerald's chair, which he normally sat in for breakfast and late-night crossword problems, and was still slumped in. And I sat by him for what seemed like an hour, gripping his hand, as if it would bring him back. At some time, the coroner arrived. They asked if I wanted a moment. I did not. What was the point? The moment I needed had passed. I walked upstairs, shut the door, and slept on our bed without changing the linens. Gerald's phone was on his nightstand. I lifted it up, hoping for anything, and there was. A missed call log from last night at 10:42 p.m. Nathan received 1 missed call. There was no voicemail or answer. He tried. Gerald attempted to chat to him last night. Perhaps he realized something was amiss. Perhaps he sensed it. Our youngster disregarded it. I clasped the phone to my chest, feeling the weight of everything we'd accomplished. 42 years of marriage, a house full of memories, and a guy who worked every darn day to ensure his family never went hungry. And Nathan's silence spoke louder than any eulogy ever could. The day of Gerald's burial was like entering a parallel dimension where I could see everyone's lips moving, but could only hear Nathan's screaming silence. I stood near the casket, grasping the podium's sides. I tried to retain my equilibrium as folks I hadn't seen in years approached and muttered things like, "He was such a good man, and we're so sorry." All I could think of was how my kid, my own child, was not present, not in the pews, not standing alongside me, not even in the stupid parking lot. When I phoned the night before to confirm the funeral time, Megan answered and said Nathan was still thinking about it because they had already planned a weekend excursion and cancellation costs are high this close to the day. I recall gazing at the phone, blinking as she talked about Megan's birthday and how she was trying to keep things light for her own mental health. I did not even react. I simply hung up. I didn't want to beg to attend a funeral, especially Gerald's. Not when Dad was the one who stayed up all night with a fussy Nathan, spent weekends constructing Lego towns, and taught him how to balance a checkbook by the age of 12. And not when Gerald contacted Nathan the night before his death and never received a call back. Everyone noticed. Of course they did. The rumors began before the service had begun. Where is Nathan? Did he miss the flight? Is Megan all right? As if they were the ones we should be concerned about. Even Gerald's college pal Frank leaned in and remarked, "I thought your boy would be front and center today." And I just nodded, like if it wasn't splitting me in two. But the moment that truly broke me occurred after the service, when one of Gerald's coworkers, Brian, approached me near the coffee urn in the fellowship hall and said, "I don't mean to pry, but Gerald mentioned something odd in passing last." Months' efforts to assist Nathan financially were evidently stressful. That shocked me, since Gerald had never told me anything like that. We had no secrets, or so I assumed. I did not ask Brian to elaborate. I just grinned. I thanked him for coming and excused myself to the washroom, where I sat on the toilet seat lid staring at the floor until someone knocked and asked if everything was okay. Everything was not okay. My son missed his father's burial for a breakfast and a weekend excursion, and now I'm hearing indications of financial difficulty and confidentiality. When I arrived home that night, the solitude was awful. I poured myself a glass of wine, looked at Gerald's recliner, and tried not to think about how chilly and lonely I felt. Then I unlocked my phone to find a photo Megan had shared. On Instagram, she posted a photo of herself in a bright pink outfit sipping a mimosa with the remark, "Best birthday ever, love my husband." It had been posted at the funeral. During the eulogy, I looked at the TV until the image became blurry and my hands began to tremble. That night, I could not sleep. I laid in our bed, reflexively, feeling for the weight of Gerald's hand alongside me, but came up empty. At approximately 3 a.m., I got up, opened Gerald's desk drawer, and began taking out documents, bank statements, insurance records, old invoices, anything that may explain what Brian had said, since it was no longer simply sadness. Now there was something more, something colder, a sensation that I might not know the complete tale of my own family, and Gerald, the one guy who might have explained everything, was gone. The next morning, I awoke with a goal, not out of curiosity, but out of something sharper, more like wrath disguised as sadness. And I walked directly to Gerald's file cabinet, which he kept locked, but always said I had a spare key, for which I did taped to the back of our wedding photo in the closet, as a nice little gesture of confidence that now felt more like a test. I opened the drawer and began browsing through files stuffed with years of tax returns, retirement plans, and bank statements sorted by month and year, like a guy who never expected to die in the middle of a conversation. It didn't take long to locate it, a small blue folder called Nathan Transfers. I sat down, my pulse racing, and flipped through a history of subtle treachery. Regular wire transactions from Gerald's account to Nathan's $2,000 here, $3,500 there, and one that made my palms shiver, $12,000, titled Urgent Megan Medical. I gazed at the numbers as if they could alter if I blinked hard enough. There were 15 transfers in the last 18 months. I had no idea. Gerald never informed me. We did not keep secrets. We decided on it the day we linked our bank accounts and chose a crib jointly. I kept reading, hoping to find a hint that would make it all make sense. That's when I discovered it, a letter folded and placed between the final 2 lines. It was penned on yellow legal pad paper, which Gerald usually kept on his desk, and it was not addressed to me. It was addressed to Nathan. "Nathan, it said that this is the second time you've told your mother one thing and done another." I remained quiet because I wanted to think you were being truthful. But if you lie about Megan's costs again, or if I discover you've used this money for something other than what you said, I'll have no option but to cut you off totally. I love you, but I will not allow you to take advantage of your mother's trust. It wasn't signed, but I recognized Gerald's handwriting as I know the wrinkles on his palm. He never mailed it. It was dated 2 weeks before to his death. I sat there looking at it, my palm quivering and the paper crinkling in my grip. My thoughts kept returning to the way Nathan's voice sounded on the phone after I informed him his father had died, calm and convenienced, as if I was asking him to reschedule a dental visit. I could not breathe. I could not weep. I just sat there, locked in the dreadful understanding that the man I loved had spent the final few months of his life silently fighting our son's falsehoods while sheltering me from the consequences. And now Nathan, who couldn't be bothered to attend the burial, has received tens of thousands of dollars while claiming nothing is wrong. I returned the folder to the drawer, locked it, and tucked the key behind the photo where it belonged. Not out of respect, but because I needed time to think, not just about the money or the lies, but about what it all meant. What kind of man my son had become, and whether I had the strength to finish what Gerald clearly had not been able to do. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same spot. Gerald had died 5 days before, and he glanced at the identical coffee cup he'd used still unwashed in the sink. I wasn't sure what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing. I was finished pretending everything was good. He arrived unannounced on a Wednesday 5 days after the burial, as if this somehow made everything acceptable, as if grieving had a time limit, and his belated entrance might still count for something. But when I opened the door and saw Nathan standing there, his hands in his jacket pockets, and that empty, uncomfortable expression in his eyes, I was not relieved. I sensed calculation, as if he had come out of duty, or worse, damage control. Megan was behind him, sitting in their car, idling in the driveway, as if she was ready to drive away the moment it became awkward, which told me everything before he even spoke. "Mom," he whispered, and I moved aside, without saying anything, guiding him into the living room, where Gerald's chair remained intact, a mute reminder of all Nathan had disregarded. I offered him coffee out of habit, but he rejected, twitching on the edge of the couch, as if he was hoping for a commercial break to flee. And when he did speak, it was with strained civility. "Megan feels I should have arrived sooner, and she's probably correct." And I wanted to chuckle because, of course, she was the one who informed him. Of course, it required her permission, not love guilt or conscience, but just her stating, "Go fix it," like it's a PR issue. I nodded slowly and sat across from him, my phone already recording from the pocket of my cardigan, since I didn't trust myself to recall every lie, every diversion, and I didn't trust him not to gaslight me about it later, especially after what I'd seen in Gerald's records. "Did you know that your father tried to call you the night before he died?" I questioned, studying his face for the flinch which came. A small quiver of his jaw, followed by a guarded shrug. I kept my phone on quiet. We were out to supper. Megan had prepared this surprise, and he caught himself in mid-sentence, as if he recognized how silly that sounded. And I just let the quiet last until it grew uncomfortable enough for him to fill it with more half-formed excuses. I planned to call him back, and I did, but I didn't realize it was serious. He never mentioned anything about being unwell. You didn't either. And I kept my look neutral because I didn't want him to know how much that phrase stung and how soon. He attempted to transfer the responsibility onto me, as if it was my fault he didn't show up. Gerald's death, for example, was the result of a scheduling blunder for which we were all responsible. "He was not unwell, Nathan. He suffered a heart attack at the breakfast table." 5 minutes after joking about the coffee creamer, I replied plainly, and he turned away, wiping his brow as if the topic was a burden. I felt as if my refusal to smooth things over was exacerbating the situation. Then I leaned forward and said honestly, I located the transfers, and his entire body tightened, as if I had dropped a match on gasoline. "What transfers?" He spoke too rapidly and loudly, and I didn't care to ease him into it. "The ones from Dad's account to yours, Megan's medical expenses, your trip, and the rent gap." "Don't lie to me, Nathan. Not now." And he had the guts to appear outraged. "These were loans, Mom. We were going through a difficult time," Dad offered. And that's when I handed him the folded yellow letter Gerald had written but never sent. The one in which he warned Nathan that if he lied again, the money would stop. He read it quietly, then folded it back up as if it weren't the most damning piece of proof of who he'd become, saying, "I didn't mean that." And I realized I wasn't speaking to my son anymore, the one who used to fall asleep on Gerald's chest watching Sunday football. Not the adolescent who helped construct his father's shed in the backyard, but a guy who had learned to justify his own treachery. And I experienced nothing except cold, keen clarity. This was not someone who made a mistake. This was someone who had repeatedly chosen to favor his personal comfort over our family. And now he was here because Megan had instructed him to save whatever was left. I rose up, proceeded to the door, and stated, "I'll let you know if I need anything from you." And he seemed to want to say something. But Megan honked from the driveway, and he just nodded, walked out without a hug or asking how I was doing. And I watched him go into the car and Megan look at the home with that grin she probably didn't realize she was wearing when she felt she had won something. And I thought, you've got no idea what's coming. The morning following Nathan's visit, I awoke with an unnerving peace, the sort that comes not from tranquility, but from determination. I didn't even make coffee before phoning our long-standing attorney, Alan Klein, who handled Gerald's case. For decades, we received business filings and birthday cards without fail. When I informed him I needed to modify my will right away, he didn't ask any questions and just made my appointment for the next day. I gathered everything, including bank statements, Nathan's transfer folder, Gerald's unsent letter, and the audio clip of Nathan's sad half-confession from the day before. Then we added one more item, a handwritten note to our granddaughter Ava, to be opened on her 18th birthday. Because whatever else happened in this family, the little child earned it. To know the reality, not the narrative her mother would weave, or Nathan's attempt to pass off quiet as dignity. When I arrived into Alan's office, he took one look at me and remarked, "I'm guessing this is about more than estate planning." And I nodded, handed him the paperwork, and added, "Everything goes into the trust. Every account, every asset, the property, the annuity, Gerald's investments, but not for Nathan, Megan, or a penny." And he didn't flinch. He simply opened a legal pad and began writing. We designed it such that Ava would receive everything once she reached 25, with early access limited to educational and living expenditures. No expensive automobiles, no guilt-driven rewards for teenagers. And I wanted Alan to insert a provision stating that if Nathan or Megan ever sought to dispute the will, Ava would take full control immediately, and they would lose all rights, including visitation, during the trust's active years, which I knew sounded harsh. However, when a parent chooses brunch over a funeral and a spouse chooses manipulation over sorrow, you stop thinking about diplomacy and begin preserving the last piece of your husband that remains on earth. Alan went over everything twice, added a spot for the note I'd written, and sealed it in a manila envelope labeled, "For Ava," on her 18th birthday. Also supplied was a transcript of Nathan's visit, which confirmed the deceit, financial abuse, and emotional desertion. And then he looked at me and said, "Cora, this is solid. There are no loopholes or weak points, but it will hit him hard." And I answered, "That is the point, Alan. It is supposed to." The final draft was notarized and filed in about an hour. And I went out feeling not like I'd won, but like I'd recovered something, a boundary, a line in the sand Gerald couldn't quite draw. And it was not vengeance. It was reality. If my son chose to treat his parents like ATM machines with no expiry date, he'd find out how long that machine had been observing, documenting, and waiting for the perfect time to cut the cord. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of wine, rereading the letter I had written to Ava. 6 pages of honesty, not hatred, revealing who her grandpa was, what he'd done for her father, and how that compassion had been used to manipulate and deceive. I informed her that the money she would one day get was not a gift, but a duty. A reminder to prioritize love over convenience, loyalty over looks, and courage over conformity, since she was the only one in our family who still had a chance to do it right. When I sealed that envelope, I felt as if I had ended a chapter, not of pain, but of quiet. The type that creeps in when people you care about betray you, gently enough that you forget it at all, until one day you're standing at a funeral alone. And now, finally, I had ensured that silence would not be passed on. The letter arrived in Nathan's mailbox 4 days after I left Alan's office via certified mail with a delivery confirmation slip, arriving in my email at 11:13 a.m. And I envisioned him standing in his kitchen going through envelopes as if it were any other Wednesday until he noticed the legal firm's insignia embossed on the corner. And I knew the instant he opened it, since he didn't call, text, or email neither that day or the next. But Megan did, and not with words, but with a series of rapid-fire emails ranging from passive-aggressive, "Yeah, classy Cora," to outright angry, "You're unbelievable. Do you even care about Ava?" And I didn't respond, since silence was the most honest thing I could offer them. When I eventually answered the phone on the third day, it was Nathan calling from a blocked number, his voice low, unsure, almost gentle, as if he believed if he used the tone he used when he was 6, he wouldn't have to acknowledge he'd broken something. I would melt into the mother he knew from before everything turned to ash. He began with, "Mom, I just got the letter," as if I hadn't already known, as if the previous 72 hours hadn't been heavy with the weight of his reaction. And I said nothing, allowing the stillness to speak. And when he eventually asked, "Is this real?" I said, "You tell me," since there was nothing else to explain. And the pause that followed felt like the longest 10 seconds of my life, until he eventually added, "I had no idea Dad felt that way." And I snapped, not yelled or raged, but simply snapped into ice. "You didn't know since you didn't inquire, Nathan. You were too busy pretending that we were optional." Megan picked up on the other end of the line, her voice shrill and demanding. "You can't actually disinherit your own son. That's insane." And I almost laughed, not because it was hilarious, but because she was so predictable. How soon the disguise fell when the money ran out. And I responded, "I did not disinherit him. I protected Ava." And Megan sneered at us, like she couldn't even imagine herself as a danger. And I responded, from this moment, this discourse, this entitlement. And before she could spew whatever hatred she had next, I hung up, since that was the limit. Now you can't choose to ignore and then demand access. You can't opt out of sadness and then claim inheritance. You can't remove the funeral and then alter the will. I sat at the kitchen table afterward, where Gerald's heart had stopped looking at the silence that followed. And for the first time since the service, I felt a sense of serenity, not satisfaction or closure, but control. I felt as if I had finally accomplished what Gerald couldn't bring himself to do before it was too late. Later that night, I received another text from Nathan. It simply stated, "I'm not sure how we'll recover from this." And I didn't respond because the answer wasn't mine to give anymore. It was Ava's. And one day, when she was old enough to grasp everything, she would pick who deserved a place in her life. That was the legacy I was leaving behind. They arrived on a Sunday afternoon without notice. Megan steps out of the car wearing heels too high for a driveway encounter. Nathan trailed after her, uncertain if he was there to assist or control her. And the moment I opened the front door, she came in, not with a hello or a question, but with an accusation. "You're using legal threats to manipulate this family." Her voice was crisp and precise, as if she'd rehearsed it in the mirror. And I stood at the doorway, not welcoming them in, not moving an inch, simply letting the weight of her words break the space between us. And then she said, "You're punishing us for setting boundaries." And that's when I noticed it, the arrogant tilt of her head, the assumption that she still had the moral high ground despite skipping Gerald's funeral, siphoning money via Nathan, and attempting to play victim in a scenario she authored herself. I didn't say anything, simply stepped aside to let them in, primarily because I knew Ava was upstairs in the hallway, half listening as all kids do. And something inside me needed her to see this, not to hurt her, but to defend her, to offer her truth as armor. Megan walked into the living room, her perfume and words thick. And Nathan sat calmly, eyes fixed on the floor, while she took the lead as she usually did. "We spoke with a lawyer," she added, arms crossed. "And if this will is not amended, we may have reason to doubt your ability." And that's when I finally spoke calmly and quietly. "Are you threatening to declare me mentally unfit?" Megan shrugged. "I am only stating that it is not uncommon. Grief has a curious effect on individuals." I couldn't tell if Nathan's flinch was due to remorse or embarrassment. And then I heard a slight groan from the hallway floor upstairs, and Ava shifted her weight, listening. And I knew that every word was being taken in by the single person in this family who still had the ability to see properly. I went to Nathan and asked if he agreed with her, and he didn't respond, just gulped and turned away. And Megan's quiet was louder than her words because it reinforced what I needed to know. He would not stop her. He wouldn't stand up to her. He would not protect his mother or father's memories if it meant causing discord in his own household. Megan used the quiet as fuel, went closer and said, "You are tearing this family apart for money." And I laughed, not loudly or mockingly, but with a single dry chuckle, the type you let out when something is so ludicrous that it borders on tragedy. And I stated that I was pulling it apart. Gerald died alone. His own son did not show up. "And you're worried about your inheritance." That's when I noticed Ava enter the hallway halfway down the stairs, eyes wide but steady, and Megan turned frightened. But Ava didn't say anything. She simply stared at her father, then at me, before slowly walking back upstairs. And the weight of that silent moment hovered over the room like a thundercloud about to break. Megan also saw it, her expression wavering for the first time, and she replied, "I don't understand." And I said, "She understands more than you realize." And then I opened the front door, held it wide, and said, "We're done here." Nathan stood without resistance and stepped out ahead of Megan. She paused for a second, as if she was about to add anything else. Instead, she followed with her heels clacking on the tile, and I closed the door behind them before she did. Step on the porch. It was 3 weeks after the encounter that I discovered it. A little black flash drive in an envelope snuck inside my mailbox. My name was written in Ava's precise 12-year-old calligraphy with no message or label attached. And my heart fell because I realized it wasn't anything lighthearted or innocent. This was neither a drawing nor a digital birthday card. This was serious, and it was a secret. When I put it into my laptop, I sat in quiet while files opened up before me like small windows into a world I hadn't been permitted to glimpse. Each one is named after a specific day and contains files. It made my gut twist. Phone call recordings, text message, screenshots, and even a few films taken from behind her bedroom door. Megan and Nathan's thoughts were safely nestled behind closed doors, albeit shaky, yet clear enough to hear. Conversations. Megan yelled loudly in one tape. "She uses her will to manipulate everyone. And if Ava agrees with her, I swear to God, Nathan will take her out of that school and homeschool her until she gets her mind on right." In another, Nathan's voice was calmer, but still awful. "Just let Mom play her game. We weren't banking on the money just now anyhow. And if Ava is pleasant, she may be able to aid us later." And I sat there paralyzed, listening to my own son discuss my estate, as if it were a strategy board, as if I were a dying pawn rather than his live, breathing mother. But the worst part came in a video titled "Kitchen Night," in which Megan mumbled into her phone while standing by the sink. "If we press a bit harder, she will crack. We'll call her bewildered. Maybe have the lawyer interrogate her." State of mind. And suddenly, bang, the trust is flagged, and I could hear Ava's breath catch just before the video ended. And I'm not sure what shattered me more, Megan's bravado or the fact that my granddaughter had been shielding me for long. I was attempting to protect her. A text document buried at the bottom of the files was only a few lines long, but it read like a blow in the gut. "Grandma, I wasn't sure who else to inform. I hear things when they believe I'm sleeping. I know they are lying. I believe you. I'm keeping this in case you ever need assistance." I gazed at those words for as long as I'd read anything since Gerald's letter, and I realized in that moment that the legacy I believed I was leaving wasn't about money, trust clauses, or retribution, but about her. About Ava standing alone in a house where truth was viewed as poison, documenting evidence to defend the only adult in her life who hadn't let her down. I backed up the drive twice, once for Alan and once in my safe. I also prepared a fresh letter to Ava, sealed and dated to be unsealed if something happened to me before she turned 18, because I needed her to know that I believed and trusted her. And that if she ever had to testify before a judge, a school counselor, or anybody else who questioned her sanity, she'd have proof that she witnessed everything and never looked away. That night, I did not cry or anger. I just sat in Gerald's chair, clutching the small flash drive in my palm, like it was a grenade and a gift all at once. And I made a commitment to defend not only Ava's inheritance, but also her voice, because she was the first in our family to utilize it. The mediation was held in a neutral office downtown, a beige room with formal chairs and bottled water on a glass table. A facility created to make everyone feel safe as they prepare for war. And when Nathan and Megan stepped in, Megan was dressed for a courtroom drama audition, and Nathan appeared 10 years older than he had a month before. I didn't welcome them or smile. I simply sat with Alan by my side. The folder holding Ava's flash drive, the bank transactions, Gerald's unsent letter, and the transcript of Nathan's recorded visit sat neatly in front of me like a silent menace wrapped in paper. The mediator introduced herself and began with a kind, neutral tone asking why we were here. Megan quickly went into her story depicting me as grieving and resentful, implying that my decisions were motivated by emotional instability and impending cognitive impairment. And I saw her practice her victimhood like it was a screenplay she had learned. While Nathan sat beside her, motionless face drawn and eyes darting away whenever I looked at him. And when it was my turn, I did not raise my voice or shake. I just passed the folder across the table and stated, "This is why." And I watched the mediator scan through page after page of documents, dates, transactions, handwritten notes, the audio file list, and eventually Ava's flash drive, which had a plain printed label as proof. And I knew when the room shifted, when the weight of truth broke Megan's illusion, because the mediator paused, looked up, and asked Megan directly, "Were you aware that your daughter recorded statements about attempting to alter a legal trust through manipulation?" Megan's cheeks drained of color as she sputtered. "She is 12. She doesn't comprehend the context." Unfortunately, it was too late. The words were out, the tapes existed, and the facade fell quickly. The mediator went to Nathan and asked if he wanted to speak, but he didn't say anything, only rubbed his hands together as if he was attempting to remove his own shame. And I said, "She tried to warn you." And Megan erupted, not with words of defense but with hatred, slamming her fist on the table and shrieking, "All because you couldn't manage your husband's death. Now you're attempting to punish us because you are lonely." The mediator then gently invited her to walk outside for a moment to recover herself. Megan stormed out her heels, ringing along the corridor, leaving Nathan behind. For the first time since Gerald's burial, Nathan spoke directly to me, his voice quiet and exhausted. I didn't realize it had become so awful, and I replied that you didn't want to know, and he nodded slowly, gazing at the ground. I simply wanted tranquility, and I reminded him that peace does not come from silence. It comes from stepping up when it counts. When the mediator returned, she advised us that there was no need to question the trust because it was legally sound, ethically justifiable, and based on extensive documentation, and that Ava's claims were credible as evidence of unfair pressure in the home. Megan did not return even to hear the outcome. Nathan departed shortly after silently without a handshake or a look back. And I stood behind for a while to grab my belongings, and I felt the weirdest sensation sweep over me. Not triumph or relief, but a kind of quiet melancholy. The type that comes when you understand the struggle is finished, not because you won, but because the truth has made it impossible for anybody to continue pretending differently. Ava turned 18 on Friday, and the occasion was marked by a quiet knock on my door just after midday, rather than balloons or cake. Her eyes were wide but steady as she went inside and gave me the unread letter I had sent to her 5 years ago. "Still sealed," I added. "I wanted to read it with you, but I didn't say anything, just nodded and watched as she gently opened the package as if it might fall apart in her hands. Unfolding the 6 pages I'd poured my heart and soul into when everything seemed to be collapsing, and she read silently for several minutes, her expression moving from concentration to tears, halting just once to inquire whether all of this was still true. And I confessed everything, and she grabbed me harder than she had before, whispering, "Thank you for telling me the truth when no one else would." I felt every ounce of anguish and purpose behind that hug. After we sat in Gerald's old chair together, she brought out her phone and showed me a brief video of herself standing in front of a judge at a formal name change hearing, clearly saying, "I'd like to change my middle name to Coraline after my grandmother," and I couldn't stop crying. My chest split open at the sound of her regaining her identity, selecting a part of this family that did not harm her, lie to her, or treat her as leverage. Later that afternoon, we attended her graduation ceremony, and as she crossed the stage and her complete new name, Ava Coraline Whitfield, was announced, she smiled and looked directly at me. And I saw in her expression not only pride, but clarity, the type Gerald used to wear when he made difficult judgments that no one else understood until too late. Nathan was also present, sitting alone in the back row, his eyes red, his suit crumpled, and clapping out of necessity rather than delight. And he didn't contact me or Ava, not because he wasn't supposed to, but because I believe he finally realized what it meant to be cut off in ways that went beyond the bank account. Following the ceremony, Ava went to me first, embraced me again, and whispered that she had chosen me to live with next semester. Her roommate backed out, and I chuckled through tears, knowing that I'd have another year of her stories with her music playing in the background. Her toothbrush was in my bathroom like a silent victory over all Megan attempted to script. We never discussed Megan that day because by that point, she had faded into the background like an irrelevant subplot. Her silence was more revealing than any apology she never offered. And as I tucked Ava in that night in her old childhood room, I left the door slightly open like I used did. And she added, "You gave me a life I didn't realize I needed." I kissed her forehead and murmured, "You chose it." "Sweetheart, I've just cleared the route, And as I walked down the hallway back to my room, past Gerald's portrait on the wall, I gently stroked the frame and murmured, "She's going to be fine, love. We'll be okay." And for the first time in years, I truly believed it.